Frank Miller sat on his porch in the Montana wilderness, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. At 67 years old, his body still carried the scars of wars fought long ago. His joints ached when rain was coming, and the old bullet wound in his leg bothered him most mornings. But today, it was the news on his tablet that caused him pain. The Galactic Alliance, which Earth had joined just 15 years ago, was losing a war. The Crixian Empire had launched surprise attacks on frontier worlds 3 months ago. Despite their advanced technology, the alien species of the Alliance were falling back on every front. Frank sipped his coffee and scrolled through the reports. The Crixians used tactics that confused the Alliance forces. Their ships appeared without warning, their soldiers fought with unexpected ferocity, and their strategies seemed to change constantly. The cabin's proximity alert chimed. Frank reached for the old pistol he kept nearby, a habit from decades of military service. Through the trees, he spotted an unusual vehicle approaching, sleek, silent, and definitely not human-made. 2 figures stepped out. One was clearly human, a woman in a formal government uniform. The other was Xerillian, a blue-skinned alien species known for their diplomatic skills. Major Frank Miller. The woman called out, "I'm Laura Daniels from Earth's Diplomatic Corps. This is Ambassador Vextil of the Galactic Council. We need to talk." Frank invited them inside, where they sat at his simple wooden table. The Xerillian ambassador's 4 eyes blinked nervously. "The Alliance is losing the war," Ambassador Vextil said directly. "Our forces have superior technology, but the Crixians adapt too quickly. They fight in ways we don't understand." Frank nodded. "I've been following the news." Laura leaned forward. "The Council has sent representatives to Earth with an unusual request. They want human soldiers." Frank laughed, then realized they were serious. "Why?" "Our weapons and ships are considered primitive by Alliance standards." "Not your weapons," the ambassador said. "Your experience. Your tactics. He searched for the word, unpredictability. Laura slid a tablet across the table showing official documents. "The Council believes human veterans might understand the Crixians' methods better than their own commanders. They're specifically requesting soldiers with actual combat experience." Frank stared at them. "Most veterans with real combat experience are my age or older. We're not exactly in fighting shape." The ambassador's skin rippled, a sign of urgency in Xerillian body language. "We don't need you to fight physically. We need your minds. Your species has thousands of years of warfare history. The Alliance members have enjoyed peace for so long that they've forgotten how to think like warriors." Frank stood and walked to the window. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, people were dying because they didn't know what he knew, what every human soldier learned through blood and pain. "The Crixians have surrounded Outpost Zeta 9, Laura said quietly. 2 million civilians are trapped there, along with the Alliance's largest hospital ship. They have 3 weeks of supplies left." Frank turned back to them. "And the mighty Galactic Council thinks a bunch of old human soldiers can help." "Yes," the ambassador said simply. "The Council voted yesterday. Some members objected, calling humans too aggressive, too primitive. But the military situation is desperate." Frank picked up his phone. His finger hovered over a name. Susan Carter. They had served together in 3 campaigns. She would tell him this was ridiculous, that they were too old. Then she would ask when they were leaving. "I'll need to make some calls," Frank said. "There are people, good people, who might help. But I want one thing clear. If we do this, we do it our way." The ambassador's 4 eyes blinked in agreement. The Council anticipated this condition. "You will have full tactical authority." Frank pressed Susan's number and listened to it ring. Outside, more stars appeared in the night sky. Old soldiers going to war among the stars. It sounded like something from the science fiction books he'd read as a boy. Except this wasn't fiction, and real lives depended on what happened next. "Susan," he said when she answered, How do you feel about saving the galaxy? The Alliance military headquarters was a massive structure that floated in orbit around Jupiter. Frank Miller stood by the large window, watching the gas giants swirling storms. Earth looked small from here, a blue marble in the distance. "Never thought I'd be back in uniform," said a voice behind him. Frank turned to see Susan Carter approach. At 62, her hair was silver, but her eyes remained sharp. She had served in special forces and had more combat experience than anyone else Frank knew. "Feels strange," Frank agreed, tugging at his collar. The Alliance had provided them with new uniforms, lightweight materials that adjusted to body temperature and protected against minor injuries. The door slid open, and 3 more people entered the room. William Jones walked in first, his big frame still impressive at 70. Behind him came Patricia Coleman, a former military doctor who had seen plenty of combat during her career. John Martinez entered last, moving carefully with a slight limp. "The old gang," William said with a booming laugh. "Ready to show these aliens how humans fight?" Frank nodded at each of them. They had all served together at various points, fought together, built together. Now they were being called upon one last time. An Alliance officer entered, a tall, insect-like being from the Trill species. "The Council representatives are ready for you," he clicked in accented English. They followed him to a large circular chamber where members of the Galactic Council waited. Some appeared in person, others as holographic projections. Beings of all shapes and sizes watched the 5 humans with expressions ranging from hope to doubt. "These are the warriors?" asked a jellyfish-like creature floating in a special tank. "They appear damaged by age." Susan stepped forward. "On Earth, we have a saying, old age and treachery will overcome youth and skill." A murmur ran through the chamber. The Alliance translator struggled with the concept. Frank addressed the Council directly. "We've reviewed your battle reports. Your forces are losing because they fight by the book. The Crixians don't. We don't either." A tall, blue-skinned council member leaned forward. "We were told humans have unusual combat methods. Perhaps a demonstration." William smiled, happy to oblige. The council set up a training area where Alliance soldiers, young, fit, and equipped with advanced technology, faced the elderly humans in simulated combat scenarios. What followed shocked the watching aliens. The humans moved unpredictably. They used the environment, created distractions, and employed tactics that seemed illogical until they worked. Within minutes, the Alliance soldiers were defeated. "That," Frank said, breathing hard from exertion, "is how humans fight." Later, they gathered in a briefing room. A holographic display showed Outpost Zeta 9, a massive space station orbiting a forest moon. Red indicators showed Crixian forces surrounding it. 2 million civilians, Patricia said, studying the medical reports. Food and medicine running low. John studied the communications data. Their distress signals are being blocked. The Crixians are jamming everything. William pointed to the Crixian fleet positions. They're waiting for reinforcements before the final attack. We have maybe 10 days. Frank looked at his old friends. They were tired. Their bodies ached, but their minds were sharp, filled with decades of hard-won knowledge about survival and warfare. "The Alliance has assigned us a ship," Frank said. "It's fast and well-armed." "Do they expect us to fight the entire Crixian fleet?" Patricia asked. Frank shook his head. "No. We're going to train the Alliance forces on Zeta 9. Teach them to think like humans." Susan studied the tactical display. "The Crixians won't expect a small ship to break through their blockade. They also won't expect what we're bringing," William added with a grim smile. Outside the briefing room, council members watched through a one-way window. Some looked concerned, others hopeful. "Are we really putting our fate in the hands of these aging primitives?" one asked. "Every other option has failed," another replied. "And there's something about them, a confidence I haven't seen in our own commanders." Frank placed his hand on the holographic image of Zeta 9. "We leave in 6 hours. Get some rest." As the humans filed out, the council members continued to watch, wondering if they had made the right choice in calling upon Earth's old soldiers. The Alliance starship Celestial Voyager moved through space at incredible speed. Inside, Frank paced the command deck, his old boots making a familiar sound against the metal floor. The Alliance had offered him their standard footwear, but he refused. Human boots had carried him through war zones on Earth. They would do the same among the stars. "You're making the crew nervous," Susan said, joining him by the main view screen. The alien crew members glanced at the humans with a mixture of hope and doubt. "Good," Frank replied. "Nervous means alert." William entered the command deck carrying a large duffel bag. The Alliance security officer, a tall, reptilian being, moved to stop him. "What are those objects?" the officer asked, eyeing the bag with suspicion. William opened it to reveal an assortment of weapons, old rifles, pistols, even a few knives, just some tools of the trade. The security officer looked confused. "Our scans show these are projectile weapons, highly inefficient compared to our energy weapons." John Martinez joined them, limping slightly. "Sometimes inefficient works when efficient fails. Your enemies expect energy weapons with certain signatures. They don't look for bullets." Patricia was the last to arrive, carrying a medical kit filled with Earth supplies. "Their advanced medicine is remarkable," she explained to Frank, "but sometimes you need simple solutions." The ship's captain, a blue-skinned Andoran with 4 arms, approached the humans. "We will reach the Zeta-9 system in 10 hours. The Crixian blockade has 16 warships. I must advise that our chances of breaking through are less than 20%. Frank nodded. "Show me their positions again." A holographic display appeared, showing the Crixian ships arranged in a spherical formation around the space station. Frank studied it for a moment, then pointed to a spot. "There's our entry point. Their formation has a rhythm to it, a pattern in how the ships move." Susan saw it too. They rotate positions every 42 minutes. There's a 3-second gap when these 2 ships change places. The captain looked skeptical. 3 seconds is not enough time. "It is if you don't fly like everyone expects," William interrupted. "Your pilots are too predictable. They fly in standard patterns." Frank turned to John. "Can you access their communication systems? I want to hear how the Crixians talk to each other." John set up at a console and began working with the ship's communication officer. Soon, the sound of Crixian transmissions filled the room. The language was harsh, clipped. "They're coordinating with precise timing," John said. "Military precision." "Too much precision," Susan noted. "That's a weakness. When something unexpected happens, they'll need to ask for new orders." Frank felt his old leg wound ache as he moved around the holographic display. Age was catching up to him, but his mind remained sharp. He saw patterns in the Crixian defenses that reminded him of conflicts on Earth decades ago. "Captain," he said finally, "we'll need to modify your ship's energy signature. Make it look like something it's not." The Andoran captain looked uncertain. "That would violate Alliance military protocols." Patricia laughed softly. "That's exactly why the Crixians won't expect it." For the next several hours, the human veterans worked with the alien crew, teaching them to think differently. Frank watched as Susan showed the navigation officer how to fly evasively. William worked with the weapons team, showing them how to create distractions. John established communications protocols that would confuse enemy listeners. As they neared the Zeta-9 system, Frank gathered everyone on the command deck. The space beyond the view screen was dark, but somewhere ahead waited an enemy who thought they knew all the rules of war. "The Crixians are expecting an Alliance ship to behave like every other Alliance ship," Frank told the crew. "We're going to show them how humans enter a battlefield." The captain gave the order, and the Celestial Voyager accelerated toward the blockade, carrying 5 old soldiers about to change the course of a galactic war. Alarms blared as the Celestial Voyager raced toward the gap in the Crixian blockade. The ship shuddered violently as enemy weapons fire grazed its shields. 3 seconds, Frank shouted above the noise. Just like we planned. The Andorran captain's four hands moved rapidly across the control panels. The ship rolled sideways, then dived at an angle no Alliance vessel would normally attempt. For one heart-stopping moment, they passed between two massive Crixian warships. Then they were through. They're scrambling to respond, John reported from the communication station. Their commanders are shouting contradictory orders. Susan smiled grimly. Confusion. The first weapon in a human soldier's arsenal. The space station Zeta-9 loomed ahead, a massive structure orbiting a small moon. The Crixian forces had it surrounded, but hadn't yet launched their final assault. They're sending pursuit ships, William warned, watching the tactical display. Patricia gripped her seat as the ship performed another wild maneuver. We won't outrun them for long. We don't need to, Frank replied. We just need to reach the station. The Celestial Voyager docked with Zeta-9 10 minutes later. As the airlock opened, a group of Alliance officers waited to greet them. Their expressions changed from hope to confusion when they saw 5 elderly humans step forward. You're the reinforcements? Asked a tall, bird-like officer with brightly colored feathers. We're the advisors, Frank corrected, and we need to move quickly. The station commander, a gray-skinned alien named Admiral Vorex, led them to the command center. Displays showed the Crixian forces regrouping after the humans' unexpected arrival. The situation is dire, Vorex explained. We have 2 million civilians aboard. Food supplies will last another week. Our defenses are failing. William studied the station's weapon systems. Your gunners are too predictable. They fire in patterns. John examined the communication logs. And you're transmitting on standard frequencies. The Crixians know exactly what you're saying. Susan walked around the tactical display. Your troops are positioned by the book. The Crixians can predict every move. The Alliance officers looked offended, but Frank didn't have time for hurt feelings. Show us your ground forces, he demanded. They were led to a large hangar where Alliance soldiers stood in perfect formations. Their armor gleamed, their weapons were advanced, but something was missing. They lack experience, Patricia whispered to Frank. Look at their eyes. Frank nodded. He addressed the troops directly. From now on, you'll train our way, human way. What followed shocked the Alliance soldiers and officers. The humans reorganized the defenses completely. They created irregular patterns of fire, established random communication protocols, and positioned troops in ways that seemed illogical. William set up improvised explosives near key access points. The Crixians will expect shield generators here. They won't look for old-fashioned traps. Patricia trained medical teams to work under pressure, using simple techniques that didn't rely on advanced technology that could fail. John established new communication methods. Change frequencies constantly. Use code words that make no sense. Susan worked with the station's pilots, teaching them to fly unpredictably. If you can surprise yourself with your next move, you'll surprise the enemy too. The Galactic Council watched these developments through secure transmissions. Many members were skeptical. These humans are dismantling our standard protocols, one council member complained. Our standard protocols were failing, another replied. As night fell on the station's artificial day cycle, the Crixians launched their first probing attack. A small force attempting to breach one of the outer airlocks. They met an unexpected resistance. Irregular weapons fire, traps in locations that made no logical sense, communications that couldn't be decoded. The Crixians retreated, losing 3 soldiers. In the command center, Admiral Vorex looked at Frank with new respect. How did you know where they would attack? Frank smiled. I didn't. I just made sure we were ready everywhere, in ways they wouldn't expect. Outside the station, the Crixian fleet moved closer, preparing for their main assault. But for the first time in months, the people on Zeta-9 felt something new. Hope. 3 days passed on Zeta-9. Frank sat in the dim light of the tactical room, studying Crixian attack patterns from previous battles across the frontier. His leg throbbed with pain, but he ignored it. He had worked through worse. "You should rest," Patricia said, entering with a cup of steaming liquid. "Even on Earth, you needed sleep." Frank accepted the drink. "The Crixians are planning something big. I can feel it." Patricia nodded. She had seen that look before, decades ago on battlefields back home. Frank had an instinct for enemy movements that no computer could match. "I've been studying their previous attacks," Frank said, pointing to the display. "They don't fight like machines. They adapt, learn, change tactics, almost like humans." Susan finished, joining them. She had spent the day training Alliance pilots in evasive maneuvers. Frank nodded. "Exactly. Which means we need to think beyond our own experience." Across the station, William worked with young Alliance engineers. They watched in amazement as he created explosive devices from seemingly harmless materials. "But these aren't in any technical manual," one engineer protested. William laughed. "The best tricks never are. That's why they work." In the communications center, John had established a new system using random frequency changes and code words based on Earth history. Napoleon means north. Caesar means retreat. Hannibal means attack. He explained to the communications officers. The Crixians won't understand any of it. As night fell on the station's fourth day, Admiral Vorex called the humans to the command center. The display showed the Crixian fleet repositioning. "They're preparing for a major assault," Vorex said, his gray skin pale with worry. "Our analysts predict they will target our main power core." Frank studied the display. "No, that's what they want you to think. Look at their ship movements." The others gathered around. Susan pointed to a pattern emerging. "They're creating a diversion here," she said. "Their real target will be the civilian sectors." John nodded in agreement. "They want hostages. Maximum impact with minimum military resistance." Frank turned to Vorex. "Move half your forces to the civilian sectors, but make it look like you're reinforcing the power core." The Admiral looked uncertain. "That contradicts all strategic logic." "That's the point," William said. "Stop thinking like yourself. Think like your enemy thinking like you." Patricia added softly, "It's a human specialty." Reluctantly, Vorex gave the orders. Alliance troops moved quietly to new positions, their movements disguised by false communications about power core defenses. In the early hours of the morning, the attack came. Just as the humans predicted, the main Crixian force bypassed the heavily defended power core and headed straight for the civilian sectors. But instead of finding minimal resistance, they ran into a prepared Alliance defense. The battle was fierce. Alarms blared throughout the station as weapons fire echoed through corridors. Frank led from a forward command post, directing troops with a calm voice that belied the chaos around them. His old combat instincts took over, seeing patterns in the fighting that others missed. "Sector 7 needs reinforcement," he ordered. "They're testing our left flank." Susan coordinated the fighter pilots, sending them on unpredictable attack runs that confused the Crixian formations. Williams' traps activated at key junctions, stopping Crixian advances and channeling them into prepared kill zones. Patricia worked in the medical center, treating wounded with a speed and efficiency that amazed the Alliance doctors. John kept communications flowing, ensuring every unit knew exactly what was happening while the Crixians received nothing but confusing chatter. In the Galactic Council chambers, members watched the battle through live feeds. What they saw astonished them. The elderly humans moved with purpose and confidence through the chaos of battle, making decisions that seemed to anticipate Crixian moves before they happened. "How are they doing this?" one council member asked in wonder. The human ambassador smiled slightly. "This is what thousands of years of warfare teaches you. Not how to follow rules, but how to break them at the right moment." On Zeta 9, as the Crixian forces began to pull back in disarray, Frank allowed himself a small smile. The old soldiers had turned the tide, not with advanced weapons, but with the oldest weapon of all, experience. The Crixians pulled back to regroup after their failed attack. On Zeta 9, a rare moment of calm settled over the station. Frank stood at the observation deck, looking out at the stars and the enemy ships beyond. "They're not giving up," Susan said, joining him. Her face showed the fatigue they all felt. "Just changing strategies." Frank nodded. "This next attack will be bigger. They've never faced tactics like ours before. Now they know what we can do." Admiral Vorex and his senior officers entered the observation deck. Their attitudes had changed dramatically over the past days. Where once there had been doubt and even disdain for the human veterans, now there was respect. "The Galactic Council has been monitoring our defense," Vorex announced. "They are impressed." William laughed. "Impressed enough to send actual reinforcements." Vorex's expression darkened. "The Council is divided. Some members argue we should evacuate Zeta 9 and surrender this sector." John shook his head in disgust. "Politicians, same across the galaxy." Patricia, who had been reviewing medical supplies, joined the group. "Even if they wanted to evacuate, there's no time. 2 million civilians can't be moved quickly." Frank turned from the window. "We don't need reinforcements. We need a decisive victory, something that will make the Crixians reconsider this entire campaign." Susan studied the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. "Their command ship has moved closer. They're getting confident." A plan began to form in Frank's mind. It was risky, perhaps even foolish. But it was also unexpected, which made it perfect. "We're going to capture that command ship," he said quietly. The Alliance officers stared at him in disbelief. "Impossible," one said. "Their security is impenetrable." Frank smiled. "Only if you use conventional methods." Over the next 12 hours, the human veterans prepared. They selected a small team of Alliance soldiers who had shown the most adaptability. William prepared special explosives that could breach Crixian hull materials. John devised communication methods that would work inside enemy vessels. Susan trained the team in close-quarters fighting techniques. Patricia examined Frank as he geared up for the mission. "Your leg won't handle this," she said bluntly. "It will have to," Frank replied. "I need to be there." The Crixian fleet began moving into attack formation. On the station's command deck, Admiral Vorex watched nervously as Frank's plan unfolded. First, a deliberate power fluctuation in the station's outer shields, making it appear as if their defenses were failing. "They'll see it as weakness," Frank had explained. "Their command ship will move closer to direct the final assault." Sure enough, the massive Crixian command vessel moved forward, positioning itself at the front of the attack formation. Frank, Susan, and 10 Alliance soldiers boarded a maintenance craft. It was small, with minimal power signatures, designed for external repairs to the station. "Remember," Frank told the Alliance soldiers, "think unpredictably. Do what makes no sense to you, and you'll confuse the enemy." The small craft launched, appearing to drift away from the station as if damaged. The Crixian ships ignored it, focusing on the apparent shield failure. As they approached the command ship, Susan guided their craft toward a maintenance hatch. Years of experience had taught her that even the most advanced ships had simple access points for repairs. "Now, William," Frank said into his communicator. Back on the station, William activated a series of controlled explosions in unpopulated areas. The resulting energy surges created sensor ghosts on Crixian scanners, making it appear as if the station was launching a major counterattack. The Crixian fleet responded, moving to engage these phantom threats. Only the command ship held position, its commander trying to make sense of the confusing sensor readings. That's when Frank's team attached their craft to the Crixian vessel's hull. William's special explosives created a small, precise breach. Within moments, they were inside. The Galactic Council members watched in stunned silence as human audacity unfolded before them. An elderly man with a bad leg had just led a team into the heart of the enemy fleet. "Insanity," one council member whispered. "No," replied the human ambassador. just another day for old soldiers. Inside the Crixian command ship, Frank and his team moved swiftly through the dimly lit corridors. The alien design was strange, with angular walls and reddish lighting that cast long shadows. Frank's old soldier instincts guided him as he led the way, his bad leg protesting with each step. "Security teams heading this way," Susan whispered, her ears picking up the sound of movement ahead. Frank signaled the team to take cover in a recessed doorway. Moments later, a group of Crixian soldiers rushed past, unaware of the intruders. "They're expecting an attack from outside, not inside," Frank said. "Let's use that advantage while it lasts." John's voice came through their secure communicators. "Our sensors show you're 2 levels below the command center. The ship's internal communications are in chaos. They can't figure out what's happening on the station." William added, "I've set off the second wave of distractions. Their fleet is completely scattered." Frank nodded to Susan, and they led the team toward what appeared to be a lift system. The Alliance soldiers moved quietly, applying the human tactics they had learned over the past days. "Remember," Frank told them, "when we reach the command center, we want prisoners, not casualties, especially the fleet commander." The lift carried them upward. Frank's heart pounded in his chest, partly from exertion, partly from the thrill of battle that never seemed to leave an old soldier. He had fought in jungles, deserts, and cities on Earth. Now he was fighting inside an alien ship among the stars. Yet the principles remained the same. The lift doors opened to reveal a large circular room filled with Crixian officers working at control stations. At the center stood a tall figure wearing an elaborate uniform, covered in what appeared to be military decorations. "The fleet commander," Susan whispered. Before the Crixians could react, Frank's team burst into the room. The Alliance soldiers moved exactly as they had been trained, covering all exits and targeting the command staff with non-lethal weapons. The Crixian officers reached for their sidearms, but stopped when they realized they were surrounded. Only the fleet commander continued to draw his weapon. "I wouldn't," Frank said, stepping forward. The Crixian commander stared at Frank with 4 yellow eyes. "You are human," he said in surprisingly good English. "And old." Frank nodded. "Old enough to know when a battle is lost." Back on Zeta 9, Patricia and Admiral Vorex watched the operation through a secure video feed transmitted from cameras on the team's uniforms. "They did it," Vorex said in disbelief. "They actually captured the command ship." Patricia smiled. "Never underestimate what experience can achieve." In the Galactic Council chambers, the mood shifted from skepticism to amazement. The live feeds showed the Crixian commander being secured and the command center under human control. "This changes everything," one council member said. "The Crixians have never suffered such a defeat." The human ambassador nodded. "This is why we sent our veterans. Not just to fight, but to teach." On the command ship, Frank secured the communication systems. He broadcast a message to the Crixian fleet, showing their commander in custody. "Your leader is alive and unharmed," Frank announced. "This station and its civilians are under our protection. Any further attacks will result in consequences." The Crixian ships began to pull back, confused without their command structure and unwilling to risk their leader's life. Susan approached Frank as he finished the transmission. "Not bad for a group of senior citizens," she said with a smile. Frank laughed, but then winced as pain shot through his leg. The adrenaline was wearing off, and his body reminded him of its age. "We've won the battle," he said, "but not the war, and we still have our most important mission. Teaching them to fight like humans." Susan agreed. Frank nodded, looking at the Alliance soldiers who had participated in the raid. They were watching the human veterans with new eyes, eyes that had seen what was possible when experience guided action. "These young ones learned quickly," Frank said. "Now they need to teach others." The future of the Alliance would depend not on the old human soldiers, but on how well they could pass on their knowledge. That was the true mission, and it was just beginning. 6 months later, Frank stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council. The massive room was filled with representatives from every Alliance species. He leaned slightly on a cane, his bad leg worse than before, but his back remained straight with military bearing. Beside him stood Susan, William, Patricia, and John. They all wore new uniforms, designed to honor both their human heritage and their service to the Alliance. The Crixian Empire has signed a peace treaty, announced the Council President, a tall being with silver skin. They have withdrawn from Alliance space and agreed to respect our borders. Applause filled the chamber. Frank exchanged glances with his fellow veterans. They had done what they were asked to do, but the cost had been high. After capturing the Crixian command ship, they had spent 3 months on Zeta-9, training Alliance forces. They established a new military academy that taught human tactics alongside advanced alien technology. They worked until exhaustion, sharing lifetimes of hard-won knowledge. "We now recognize Major Frank Miller of Earth," the Council President said. Frank stepped forward, feeling the weight of every battle he had ever fought. "What you did was unprecedented," the President continued. "You not only saved Zeta-9, but changed the course of the war. The question before us now is, how do we move forward?" Frank looked out at the sea of alien faces. "By remembering that technology is a tool, not a solution. By teaching your people that wars are won by those who adapt fastest. By understanding that experience matters." The council members nodded. The events at Zeta-9 had shocked them into a new perspective. After the ceremony, the 5 humans gathered in a quiet room overlooking the Council World's capital city. Alien architecture stretched to the horizon, beautiful and strange. "They're creating a new military structure," Susan said, "based on our recommendations." William nodded. "And they're recruiting human veterans as instructors." Patricia sipped a drink that approximated Earth coffee. "I've been asked to establish a combat medical program." John smiled. "The Alliance is changing. They're learning." Frank looked out at the alien world that now felt less alien than when they had arrived. "We showed them something they had forgotten. That spirit and determination can overcome superior force." And Aide entered the room. "The transport to Earth is ready when you are." The veterans gathered their few belongings. Their mission was complete. Younger humans would continue what they had started, bringing Earth's unique perspective to the Alliance military. As they walked toward the transport, Alliance personnel lined the corridors. They stood at attention, showing respect in the human military tradition that was now being adopted throughout the Alliance forces. Frank's leg ached with each step, but he walked tall. He thought about all the battles he had fought, all the soldiers he had led. This final mission had been the most important of all. On the transport home, Frank looked at his friends. They were tired but satisfied. They had been called for one last mission, and they had succeeded. "What will you do now?" Susan asked him as Earth appeared in the view screen, a blue marble against the blackness of space. Frank smiled. "Go back to my cabin. Enjoy the quiet. Until they need us again." "They won't need us," William said. "They have what they needed. Our knowledge." Frank nodded. The old soldiers had done their duty. They had passed on what they knew. Now it was time to rest. Years later, in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, new statues stood alongside the ancient monuments. 5 human figures, elderly but standing tall. Beneath them, a simple inscription. "They came when called." They fought as humans fight. They taught us to see with new eyes. And in military academies across the Alliance, young cadets of all species studied the Battle of Zeta-9. They learned about the old human soldiers who stepped onto the battlefield when all seemed lost. They learned that wisdom comes not from technology, but from experience. That the oldest soldiers sometimes fight the smartest battles, and that humans, for all their primitive ways, had something valuable to teach the stars.